Today I'm at the office of Reef Karim. Reef is an entrepreneur who created the Control Center, but he's also somebody that I've known for over a decade. He's an expert in psychology. He helps the A-list in terms of their relationships. He's written an awesome book and also has been involved not just in the business world, but in the entertainment world. You're someone who's a technical advisor for some of the most popular movies and television shows out there. I'd love for you to actually talk a little bit about what you've done, because you've done so many epic things. It's very rare that I've met someone who's both done articles for like Oprah and the Huffington Post, yet at the same time runs a very successful business.
Yeah, it's good to be here. First off, thank you for interviewing me. We all have a backstory, and our backstory and what we do in our childhood and how we grow up dictates what we do in our adult life, or what our challenges are and what our motivation, what our goals are. And there's some people that, they're just not that motivated. They're happy doing whatever it is they're doing. And there's some people like me that were super repressed growing up, not allowed to do anything, lived basically in almost like a jail cell in my house because I have really strict, controlling Indian parents. And so they were like, you're gonna be a doctor. Well, it was more like, you're going to be a doctor, or else, that's it. And when I was born, my dad literally made an announcement, like, I've decided he would be a doctor, and like lots of people are clapping and it's like a big moment. And I never wanted to be a doctor. And it's the last thing you want to do when your parents force you to do something. So I was an entertainer. I was a creator. I could act, I could dance, I could write, I could play music, and that's the life I wanted. And my parents were so hardcore and serious about being a doctor because, in their generation, it's safe. And, we're kind of, we're Asian. So it's got those Asian parents are very, like, this is the way for success. This is what you have to do. And so for me and my parents, it was doctor or bust. I mean, it was like literally doctor or like junkie. There was no in between. So they had an intervention on me, like a career intervention, to force me into medical school. I was going to be disowned if I didn't go to medical school. So I think the reason that I have all this diversity in regards to my interests and what I want to do in the world is I feel like I was kind of locked up for a long time and not allowed to express myself or be who I want to be. And then finally, like when I finished, because literally you're growing up, then you immediately are in undergrad. Then from undergrad, you're in medical school. Then from medical school, you're in your internship. Then you're in your residency. Then you're in your fellowship. And you literally wake up and you're in your late 30s. And you're just like, where did my life go? What just happened right now?
And you just did all that. Not only are you a doctor, but all the entertaining things you want to do, enter the entertainment world, do the dancing, the singing, the acting, the writing, got you into the entertainment world to the point where I think People magazine named you one of the sexiest men in the world. Something like that?
Yeah, that kind of happened. It was, I'd like to say that, nerdy guys are deemed sexy as well, which is cool. Yeah. Like, they looked at advocacy, and they looked at what you're doing in the world, and the fact that I dance and I express myself through dance and, and acting and writing and a bunch of other stuff. So the fact that neuroscience could be sexy, I think that's kind of cool.
Now, when I grew up, a lot of what I was told from my Asian family was I was also similarly trying to get my hands and feet into things like technology, volunteering for politics. I was interning for everyone from the governor to the senators. Even now, I won a charity auction to intern with Sony Pictures, to intern with Stephen Tisch, who produced Forrest Gump, and Todd Black, who did Equalizer, Pursuit of Happiness at 7 Pounds, and to work on developing this TV show for our company. But I wanted to get my hands in all these different projects, this diversity. But my parents always used to tell me, don't be the jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm wondering if your experiences from all these various things, similar to me, kind of was necessary for you to kind of take your career and become a boss of all your different skill sets and build a business. Or did you find that specializing in a certain thing was kind of like the route to allow you to build something like the Control Center?
It's a great question. I believe, because I think it's changed or evolved over time. I think back in the day, you were just really good at one thing. And whether you were building shoes or you were a carpenter or you were a doctor, you were just really good at that one thing. And you excelled at that one thing because you lived in a microcosm. You were the man as far as making shoes, or as far as like everybody knew you as that guy because you lived in that small microcosm. Now there is so much competition. There are so many doors that close and there are so many doors that open, but they don't open unless people know you're doing what you're doing. So it's really important to diversify. In my mind, you need to have multiple skills, not just one skill. And it's incredibly important to not only have multiple skills, but to then see what doors are opening and jump through those doors as quickly as you can. Don't let those doors close on you, because certain doors will open, but they might open in arenas or in a project you never intended to do. But it's something that you might be really good at.
Now, one of the things that fascinates our audience a lot is this inner game concept in terms of belief systems and mindsets for success. And one of the things that comes up a lot among people who are in our business, our client base, is their addictions to sex or their addictions to alcohol and partying. Now, as somebody who is probably the world's premier expert on the subject, I'd love for you to talk about how people can face these demons.
Well, it's interesting that I was this sweet Indian Midwestern boy who's now like a sex, drugs, and relationships expert. And I think one of the reasons that I'm able to do that is I respect the disease. I respect the condition. And it's really easy to say, oh man, my buddy's a sex addict, man, like it's crazy. And it's kind of enticing and it's alluring, right? But like sex addiction, take that for instance. It's an intimacy disorder. It's not how often you have sex, it's why you have sex. It's what sex is doing for you to compensate for internal negative feelings you have about yourself and your ability to connect with somebody else. So alcoholism is a, it's a disease process where the reward circuitry of your brain, we all have this reward circuitry where certain things make us feel good and certain things don't make us feel good. And the reason that our species survives is because it feels good to eat when you're hungry. It feels good to drink water when you're thirsty. It feels good to have sex. So we procreate, we continue to nourish ourselves because it feels good. Now, what drugs do, or what alcohol does for an alcoholic, is it jacks up that reward circuitry. It literally hijacks it and takes it over at a much higher rate than our normal feel-good condition is. So all of a sudden you take that first drink and people are like, Doc, the first time I drank alcohol, man, I felt normal. It was the first time I felt totally normal. So literally, it's think about what that's like for somebody. I mean, that's intense. And so I work with a lot of people now. I mean, my expertise is human behavior. And whether that's dating or relationships or drugs or mental health or just a regular person who just wants to do better in the world, develop an identity, express themselves, take all that inner voice that they haven't been able to let out and just let it out in the world. I think it's incredibly important that we do that.
Well, I think that the idea of relationships is something that is often foreign to my client base, because so many of them haven't transitioned into that relationship mindset. Originally, my business partner, Tyler, who's basically the main content creator, where I'm more of the business guy who focuses on the systems, he always was fascinated by the idea of possibly writing a book about transitioning into relationships. But my concern was that's a very different shift in mindset from being a guy who's out there continually going out and meeting girls to being in that one-on-one relationship. What are some of the ways that people are kind of transitioning into that process, and how much of that is a chemical process versus a choice process?
There's very much a focus on ourselves. There's very much a focus on ourselves and our business and almost survival from a business perspective. For me to have an identity in the world, this is how a lot of people think. For me to have an identity in the world, I have to make it. And to make it means I have to have a certain level of success, I have to have a business, and I have to feel good about what I'm doing. And many people believe that you can't get into a relationship mindset until you've dealt with the survivalistic aspect of yourself. It's like, okay, I've done, especially guys, I've done it. Now that I've done it, I figured it out, I got me, my identity's good, I'm all good, now I can open myself up to a relationship. And the funny thing is, for men, we actually think that way. I mean, it's a very linear process for us. And that's why, to all the women in the audience, to the women that are watching, you can, if you can bang your head and just knock on that door of that guy, your ultimate guy, and he's right there in front of you and he's right there waiting for you. But if he hasn't reached that mindset to give himself permission to be in a relationship, that girl's wasting her time. She's going to get frustrated. She's going to go nuts because that guy's not ready. But when we're ready, and that readiness for some guys is they need to be multimillionaires. They have to have huge companies. For other guys, the readiness is, okay, I accomplished something I wanted to do. I feel good about my life, or I overcame something, and now I'm good. But that transition into that relationship mode is really about your inner self-worth in regards to what you believe your milestones are to almost graduate, especially as a guy, to the point where you're ready for a relationship.
I know that personally, I felt most of my life was trying to bridge that gap between who I wanted to be and who I felt like I should be, versus who I was deep down inside, at least in terms of like my head, my mindset. I think that a lot of guys are continually trying to bridge that gap. I guess my concern is the time process of how people could have that milestone to make them ready. Can be very long, especially if you're talking about, oh, I have to be that super successful person because my whole identity is around how I should be that person. But what about the now? What about how they can feel like they're enough today?
Yeah, authenticity is a huge thing, and a lot of people live in their fantasy brain. I mean, really, their fantasy brain is, dude, I'm gonna get some amazing hot girls, and I'm gonna be a billionaire, and I'm gonna have a jet, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and that's rewarding to live in that fantasy brain. You're not getting anything done real time, but it's rewarding to the fact that you're like, oh, I could do that, and you just kind of autopilot through life, holding on to this fantasy that's somewhere out there that you're probably never going to achieve because you're not putting the work or the time into getting to that place. And once you hit the point of authenticity, like when I work with somebody, whether I'm speaking at an event or I'm like coaching them or I'm just working with a group, one of the biggest things I talk about is authenticity in regards to your identity. A lot of people don't have an identity. An addict, is really a person with an addiction, but their identity is, I'm an addict. A pain patient, I'm a pain patient. I'm not John or I'm not Bob. I'm a pain patient. I'm a single person. These are identities where people attach a label to them instead of expanding who they are. And not living in that fantasy brain is being authentic. And so I shift people from that fantasy brain thinking to that point of authenticity. And sometimes that's hard to digest, to realize, okay, I'm 35, or I'm 40, or I'm 45, and you know what? I've done maybe 5% of what I've wanted to do with my life. But you know what? Okay, that's my baseline, and now I'm gonna focus on all the things that I really wanna do, as long as they're realistic, and they're one thing at a time. Every once in a while, you get some guy who like goes into some major movie or gets $1 million, multi-million dollar company just right off the bat. But for most people, they have to work at it.
It reminds me of something that happened recently because my wife had her anniversary diamond ring, the $65,000 11-carat ring, stolen from our house by a classmate from Harvard who...
How did you figure that out?
Well, we went to a black tie gala. My buddy Tony Shea sponsored it. It was for Cirque du Soleil. And this girl was wearing this ring. I walked up to her and I said, "You're wearing the exact ring I gave my wife." Now she thought I meant it looked like it.
Okay.
But she takes it off and hands it to me. I inspect it. It's definitely the ring. And I found out what happened was he met this girl off Tinder, 3 dates in.
It's a heavy ring to give a Tinder date.
And it was not a Valentine's Day present. It was a just because I'm a billionaire boss. Now, he was trying to create a company his first year in business. The guy was trying to front that he had access to private jets and was taking pictures in front of them by getting access to an air hangar. And after I organized an operation to recover the ring, got him to confess, it was all locked down. I told him, if you want this to go away and I could move on, I need you to do one thing for me. I need you to delete all your social media where you're trying to front like you're a player. So I know that you're learning from your lessons. You're not going to hurt people in the future.
Wow.
And then I need you to move on and become a better person. And he couldn't do it. He was too stuck. He couldn't delete the social media. He wouldn't do it. So we just did a deposition, and he confessed his guilt, and we're moving forward with punishment. It's crazy, but he couldn't get rid of that identity, this fake identity that he attached himself to. You know, pretending that he was a baller, a billionaire, a boss, and trying to front. And it's that extremity that makes me think about how people will go to such extremes to avoid authenticity, to try to pretend like there's something they're not, and believe that's attraction. When attraction is more about knowing your authentic self, being comfortable with it, and conveying it in a cool way. And I think that I really like what you're talking about in terms of like the fantasy brain. It's like his fantasy brain was going off in too far of a direction, but he couldn't get out of it.
Yeah, and think about this. It is much easier to be rejected or appreciated even as a character that's not you versus being rejected as you. And it's a powerful thing. When you're a baller that gives women $65,000 diamond rings, that pretends he has a jet, that does this, that does that, but none of it's real. You didn't work for any of it. It's a complete fantasy that you're trying to, from an image conscious perspective, project out into the world. That person is preying on the fact that we have a very materialistic culture and women are going to respond to that. So he's getting girls that way, or he's getting whatever validation he wants that way. But if he gets rejected, it's not really him. It's a version of him. It's a projection of him. Now, if that guy walks into the same bar or the hotel or the restaurant and meets that same woman, or Tinder on his first date, and meets that woman and is completely himself, is vulnerable as himself, and he gets rejected, I mean, that guy's gonna have a really hard, because it sounds like he has really poor self-esteem, that guy's gonna have a really hard time getting over that. And the guy doesn't wanna feel that. You know, it's that fear of being yourself. And it's such a strong fear that people will project anything onto the world in order to not be who they really are.
What do you think are the main sources of the propagation that you have to be rich, famous, powerful, or good looking in order to get girls?
To get girls, that's interesting. I was going to say, if you look at celebrity culture, I think you could start with just the general culture. What do celebrities have that we at least see in the media, whether it's true or not? We see a lot of validation, we see adoration, we see lots of fans, we see cool cars, we see movie roles, we see riches, we see all sorts of stuff. It sounds like an amazing life. It's like royalty, or back in the day, we had the gods, right? Zeus and Aphrodite, and they were the ones that we looked up to in the world. We look at celebrities that way. And so it seems like a celebrity culture. Now, celebrities change. There might be rappers now that are celebrities, where back in the day it was rock stars, or like athletes, or there's different types of celebrities, reality stars, YouTube stars. But nonetheless, they all have stuff that we want, and it looks like a better life. So nowadays, when you ask, because there's a study, I've read multiple studies that did this, where they've asked grade school kids or even high school kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's not doctors and lawyers and engineers, it's I want to be famous. I want to be famous. And they were like, well, how are you going to be famous? I don't know, but I want to be famous. So it's more about getting that fame and that celebrity culture. So part of that fame and celebrity culture is getting girls. And the theory is, if you got a lot of money or you've got a lot of fame, you're gonna get a lot of women.
The celebrity culture, I think, is propagated so much by the mainstream media, and I feel like it's starting to shift a little bit as movies are focusing on things where like the underdog is successful, and it's kind of like defying a lot of these odds. And I think that's also a lot more of a epiphany for a lot of people. As a result, I think that opens up a lot of eyes. I think that also a lot of what's going on in terms of the mainstream culture is not just propagated by the, say, mainstream media, but also by social media and what's going on out there. I'm curious about how you found social media influencing your clients and how it's hurt their identity or changed their relationships with the world and the people closest to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's my former patients or clients. I think it's society. I mean, we all know about Facebook depression. There have been studies about Instagram and how it affects people's mood or levels of anxiety. There's people that develop a lot of anger or a lot of hurt feelings based on things they read. I mean, what is Facebook essentially? And I'm not being a hypocrite at all. I mean, I definitely use social media. I'm not addicted to social media, but I'll use it enough for work or for business or for personal stuff with my friends. So it's not like I don't use it. I use it. However, there are limitations to your relationship with social media. Like I literally ask somebody, I'll be like, tell me about your relationship with Facebook. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I go, no, tell me about your relationship with it. Because what is Facebook in a sense? It's people putting up, for them, personalized, their 15 minutes of fame on a timeline. So let's say we go through my life, and over the course of a month, I go to 4 really cool events. And I take pictures from those 4 really cool events. And the rest of the time, my life sucks. And I don't do anything with my life, and I'm a total loser, and I'm lame. And maybe I even paid to go to those 4 events. And that was the only way I could get in, and like people did me favors to get into those things. But you know that I will make it look on Facebook like I am a total baller if I'm that type of person. I will make it look like I was at these events and they were the coolest things ever and my life is amazing. So what am I doing? I'm creating that inauthenticity divide. I don't live that life, but I'm projecting that life into the world with the hope that other people will view me that way. What that does is it worsens our self-worth. It worsens our self-esteem. It makes us live more in our fantasy brain. It makes us more inauthentic. And then it affects other people who are like, damn, look at Reef. Reef's a total baller. My life sucks compared to Reef. And they're looking at my 15 minutes of fame, which are inauthentic, and they're judging their own lives and feeling bad about their own lives because they don't have those 4 things that I just did. And it just propagates and just expands and expands and expands. So it's one of those things where I feel like if you're truly authentic on Facebook or whatever social media, it could be a really interesting tool. But if you're inauthentic, if there's an inauthenticity to it, it can really affect you mentally.
I remember having a conversation with Tony Hsieh about how he views fame in the dynamics of power. And he told me that he thought that if he had a chance to not be famous and have the wealth he has today, he would prefer that over people knowing who he is. Mm-hmm. I found that really interesting because so many people that especially are from Hollywood would actually prefer fame over money. Yeah. They prefer fame over family. They prefer fame over real relationships or friends. And it's actually, I think, propagated by some kind of weird fantasy that fame is kind of like the end game, as opposed to, for other people, it could be a means to accomplish it. I know that one of my concerns when I created this YouTube channel was that if I put my face out there, then I might start to get recognized more. And I thought that because I'm not the front man for my company for the last 15 years, since 2002. So I think that it's interesting, but for you, you are the front man for your company. And I'm curious about how the dynamics of being out there in these famous channels has helped you, and also how it might have not helped you, and maybe even lowered some of the things that you wanted to have happen.
It's a great question. So for my journey, it was not really being allowed to express myself with my family, being really strict and all of that, to completely training and being locked up in school, to I'm out and I want to go do things. So I ended up, working on CNN and working on Oprah and working on all these different talk shows and, all this stuff, talking about human behavior and talking about how we lead better lives and, how we can do better things for ourselves and doing a lot of speaking. And the initial part of it was really good. I was getting not really fame, it was more like I was becoming a credible expert from a national perspective and even an international perspective. And I was getting offers to write books and write articles and speak at all these events. And I became a thought leader, which was great. But then I started to own a company. And I made the decision, you know what? I want to own a company. And in owning a company, I want to build a philosophy in that company, initially to help addiction and mental health. And now it's opened up to personal development, and I'm going on a whole new track from here. But the minute I opened the company, that's when the backlash occurred. Because now I'm a business owner. I'm not just an entrepreneur, I'm an official business owner with a company with all sorts of new competitors. Because I'm now in that marketplace. I'm not this physician that speaks, I'm an owner. And the minute that happened, there was all this backlash. Oh yeah, you don't want to go there, that's just some entertainment place. That's just some media place. That's Doc Hollywood over there. That's what anything that the competitors could say to try to, diminish my ability to help people. And the reality is, I ended up doing a lot of that media work because I had something to say. And I had something to say because I had studied and worked in that field and worked with so many people that I could help, that I had an opinion. And that opinion was not just what everybody else is doing. That opinion is rooted in what works, what is successful, what that we've researched has shown will benefit people. But that point of view can also be looked at because you're out there with that point of view. People will critique that. People will slam that because you're putting yourself out there to say something that may not be, that really Pollyanna, oh, everybody's saying that same thing. Because you're taking a stand, and that puts you out there and it puts a bullseye on you.
One of my biggest personal kind of processes of understanding how the world works, and a question I want to have answered through you to help me solve this puzzle, is somebody like yourself who is out there in the world of, say, the mainstream media with all the magazines, newspapers, and everything, yet at the same time you're also on social media. Do you believe, just kind of like a forecast, do you see a projection that the mainstream media, as we have always known it, will still have more influence in social media in terms of dictating how the world operates and the influence that you're able to have as a business owner and getting your message out there? Do you see the mainstream media still having that overlordness? Will they stay a part of the game on top? Or is the social media going to outpace it with all the influencer platforms kind of taking over their own distribution channels?
It's another good question. I think it's only a matter of time before online influencers and social media takes over mainstream media. I think it's only a matter of time. I think now there's still the base of CNN and the base of certain news channels, and where do we get our news from, and where are our biggest reporters and biggest anchors, where are they working? Well, they're working still for CNN and for Good Morning America and Nightline and blah, blah, blah. As those people shift to online, and a lot of that is coming from monetization strategies. When enough monetization strategies are happening in the online space and enough influencers have moved to online, then it's going to blow up. I mean, it's already growing and growing and growing exponentially every day. But once we get our thought leaders online as opposed to in television, it's a game changer.
Totally agree with you. Thanks so much, bro. This has been outstanding.
No problem. It's been, it's fun to help people kind of change their ways. And one of the things I'm working on right now is combining comedy and psychology and medicine in the form of late night talk. So look out for that, because that's the direction we're going right now.
Definitely. Now, for the audience who wants to learn more about you or get resources, books or educational resources, what would you recommend for them to learn more about what you're working on?
So what I'm working on right now is if you go to the website drreef.com or reefkarim.com, so REEFKARIM, Dr. Reef, doctor spelled out, reef.com, that pretty much has everything. But look out for the show Reef Madness.
I like the title.
Yeah, Reef Madness is the late night talk show we're doing. I also have a podcast that's coming out called Sex, Drugs, and Relationships with Dr. Reef.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Cheers, bro.
Thanks, man. Okay.